Hello, everybody on the thin line. This is SOS, and I'm here with the one and the only
Messy Jessie. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the thin line tonight. I am so excited. We have our very first guest. I'm going to have SOS introduce him. I'm so excited.
Well, I'm here to introduce David Tovar. And David, we're so excited to have you here. So we met at a paranormal class of all things, right?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. I'm excited to be here too.
Oh gosh, I'm so excited. So Dave and his wife took one of my classes at ISU on the paranormal, and now they're great friends, and I just adore them, absolutely adore them, and found out some of his background. So I said, David, you've got to be a guest. Would you please be a guest? So we're talking about you have a huge background, all of it in the thin line experience, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah.
Ma'am.
So when did you start down the path of like first responder? What happened?
I would say it was 16 years old when I wanted to enlist into the Navy Reserves. And it started off down the path as a hospital corpsman. During my summer vacation of my sophomore year, instead of enjoying summer like the rest of the kids, I went off into boot camp and spent my summer vacation getting yelled at and learning how to make my bed and fold my socks and underwear.
So David, let me ask you, did you go to the Great Mistake?
I did not. Where did you go to boot? I was a Hollywood sailor in San Diego.
You went to San Diego. For anybody who doesn't know, the Great Mistake is Great Lakes.
Yeah,
right?
No, it was up in
Diego.
San Diego.
Push. Okay.
Got to see the Marine Corps run by every morning while
while
we were still having breakfast.
Okay. Well, you were having breakfast. The Marines
while we were having breakfast, but
nice.
Karma will come get you when you make fun of them, because I had to go greenside later, which it ended up. I ended up going with them for a little while.
Wow.
But after getting out, I went back to high school with the giant chip on my shoulder because I was already in the military and had to finish high school.
Wow.
Graduated early, went back for my A school. As soon as I got out of A school, came back to McFarland, California, where they made that movie from Disney, and ended up getting a job for the hospital as an ER tech. And then I kind of bounced around in there as an OR tech and central sterile technician. And I was always needing more. So I ended up getting a job for Hollister in Hollister as an emergency medical technician. And it was all EMT 1A units. So there was there was no paramedics on scene. It was just all EMTs. And I remember my driver was a Vietnam veteran, and he was an interesting guy. And one of the other EMTs there was an ex-Navy SEAL. So we kind of fit in. It was all ex-military and a lot of fun, a lot of trauma in Hollister, a lot of trauma that we responded to, various different traumatic scenes that I remember.
Hollister is Central California, right?
It's right next to Watsonville.
Watsonville,
Santa Cruz, and whatnot.
Oh, Hollister. Okay. I just remember in FFA, Hollister was the FFA to beat because those kids knew their animal husbandry. Yeah. Yeah. Hollister, man.
Yeah. I always just think of Hollister like the t-shirts.
There you go. They also had a biker rally
Yeah.
I think in the 50s or 60s that got violent.
Yes.
And that's what they were known for.
Oh,
I believe it was the Hells Angels and another biker gang.
Yes,
the
it was.
Mongols.
wow.
Yeah, the Mongols back in the day.
Oh, no. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wonderful place to work. I met a lot of really professional EMTs there, because that's basically who we relied on. It was just us. We didn't have any paramedics on scene. The fire department didn't carry paramedics there, so it was us.
Wow.
There was a lot of spiritual aspects to this as well, upon responding depending on whatever the calls were. Um, there's a couple that I have in mind where one of them was a standby, and this young female, maybe 14 years old, was held up in a room with a shotgun, and she was threatening to commit suicide. And we pulled up, parked, rolled down the window, and which is really odd because I smelled death even before it happened.
Oh.
There is a pungent, sweet kind of smell to death, where we rolled down the window, and I immediately recognized that smell, and I knew what it was. And I remember looking at my driver and asking him, "We're on standby. We're not responding, right?" And as soon as I finished that sentence, boom, we heard the shotgun go off, and we ended up responding. Times were different then. Um, of course, the officers responded first, secured the weapon, and we ran up shortly thereafter. I remember even now, I was 18, 19 years old, and the shotgun blast was right underneath the sternum. Pulled in her knitted sweater, which was a blessing that she was wearing it, because it ended up pulling it all in and forming a clot to where there was not a lot of blood coming out. And I remember talking to her and loading her up and letting her know to hold on, that we'll be getting there. And she's crying and she's apologizing, because usually after situations like that, there's that instant remorse that comes in. And I remember her coding a couple of times on the way in and starting CPR and then getting her pulse back. But as soon as we got to the emergency room, they've already had the operating room set up waiting for us to arrive. She ended up blowing away the bottom part of her heart, some of her lungs, some of her internal organs, and there was no chance that she was going to survive that blast, and it was very unfortunate.
Yeah.
The back then, this was before counseling, and where we would talk about our scenes in order to prevent PTSD or anything. It was instantly, you go back out and you continue your work. Ended up getting a bald spot on the side of my head for about 6 months, where it was the stress involved from all the calls and whatnot.
Wow. And you have a community solutions, right? Active Community Solutions LLC.
Yes, ma'am.
So you're a counselor now.
Yeah.
How as a so you're a young EMT, you're in the Navy, what, reserves?
Yes.
Or what? Okay, reserves. How did you deal with the shock and the stress of everything you're seeing then?
Back then, and I don't condone this at all, it was alcohol.
Yeah.
It was pounding down a couple of beers after work with the guys, and even though there was alcohol involved and whatnot, we were talking about the situation. We were getting it out. We were sharing, and even if with the guys there, it was a camaraderie where, and you really went through it and you're still going through it, but there was communication there. And we would notice that. Again, a lot of us were ex-military and reserves at the time, so we were able to spot a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where do you think that stopped? Like, even though first responders and military and everybody will talk about things that happen like that, but where do you feel that stopped? Where
As
do you
far
think
as
it
the
became such a
taboo?
like a cliche to talk? Yeah.
It honestly, I really couldn't tell you. I know that even with time, the longer I was in the first responder field, it wasn't as common where people got together and talked about it anymore. Or even if you went to a psychiatrist, therapist, or anything, you were considered weak. You were considered unable to carry your own. So there was always that negative stigma where if you couldn't handle it, you needed to get out.
Yeah.
Or you wouldn't be trusted.
Yep.
Yep.
I absolutely, I know that for me, even in the early 90s in the service, seeing, I was an air traffic controller, seeing some of the accidents that we had to deal with. They never even offered it.
Yeah.
It was not a thing.
Yeah, it was not.
You went home and you had to be back at 0:30 to do your shift the next day.
Oh yeah.
Just even though you just saw something horrific.
Yeah.
It was never offered.
Oh yeah. There were several times pulling into the emergency room, and one episode that I remember, that I still remember to this day. I got called to a call where there was a 5-year-old who got shot in the leg. As soon as we got there and I stepped out of the ambulance, I smelled that smell. And yeah, it wasn't a shot to the leg. It was 2 little boys playing with their dad's gun. And he ended up, one of the boys ended up shooting his 5-year-old brother right between the eyes. So I luckily I walked back in, grabbed the trauma box, went in, ended up intubating him, and started CPR. Back then, it was okay to use the pressurized oxygen. This was before the ambu bag became popular, and people weren't blowing out children's lungs with the pressurized oxygen. That's why they ended up stopping. But I remember getting to the ambulance or to the ER, and every time I would hit the poor child, I could have called him. It was within my protocol to be able to pronounce him dead right there at the scene. But I've never, and I vowed as soon as I'd got into this field that I would give everybody a chance. And it was not in me to, not give 100%. So when we got to the ER, every time he was hit with the demand valve, there was blood and brain matter that would be coming out. And I remember getting to the ER and the nurses were just looking at me like in shock. And it was really odd. They grabbed me and they took me into the restroom and they're like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Well, yeah," but I didn't really process it until I looked into the mirror and I recognized that I'm covered with blood and brain matter. And cleaning up the back of the ambulance was horrific.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. I can't imagine. We call 911 because we need help, but as the victim of an accident or trauma or whatever, we don't process that you guys have to deal with all of the pieces of what you're seeing. And I can't even imagine.
There is a safety that each first responder does, where we separate ourselves from the scene, where we separate ourselves and we do not identify with the patient in front of
Yeah, the
us, the
patient,
victim,
right?
whatever it may be, as and I hate to say it like this, but as human, we're
Right.
looking at more as a patient that requires our attention, never
Right.
personalizing it to where we can respond without absorbing the shock and the trauma and the blood and everything else. That is a protection that is built in, I guess, into all of us, is to be able to shut it out and put a wall separating us from reality and what we're actually going through and what we have to do.
Yeah. And I was just going to say that too, because in some experiences, especially yours, you know, we think about time, right? And in others people's eyes, it's like time is constantly moving and constantly fast. In some experiences that I've heard with you know, law enforcement, everybody, that time stands still, you know, for other people that are visualizing what's going on. And for you guys, it's like boom, 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 you know. Or it could be moments where it was a 2-second thing and it felt like 5 minutes for you. You know, it just depends on the situation.
It feels, I do have a episode where I ended up moving back to my hometown, which was McFarland, but I was working out of Delano Ambulance at the time. Had already gone to school and became a paramedic, which I was one of the youngest paramedics in Kern County ever back then, back in the late 80s. And I remember getting called to a house in McFarland where a child had fell into a pool. And again, we separate ourselves. We take David out of the whole equation, and it is just a paramedic doing his job, to where you could deal with whatever situation is put in front of you. That episode, that call right there, I remember causing tremendous issues where I'd lost sleep, and it was a horrific scene for me, only because when I arrived, the family that was there, I had gone to church with my entire life. They knew me by a first name basis. I knew the child. And as soon as I walked in, it was no longer the fire department. It was no longer the paramedics there. It was David. Save my baby. And it was a instant episode where exactly time stands still, where it was just, and it was a matter of me trying to pull myself out of the situation all the way back. Luckily, I had been in the field for a long time, so it was almost second nature. Intubate the client and start an IV if possible, and start your CPR and whatnot, and shoot whatever medications you needed to get on board before we got there. But there are still times where nightmares come, and you know, the faces of your patients are still there.
Yeah. And it's amazing too, like you could still smell things.
Yeah.
Like it'll instantly throw you into that moment in time.
Whatever smell, even certain sounds, certain people that look like certain people will bring back an episode. And I shake my hand back and forth, because when you do get pulled back into a PTSD episode, for me, that is exactly it, where the earth shake, or everything, my vision, everything is shakes until I get in, and then until I get back out.
Can I ask you something, David? So I've had some severe PTSD. Well, I've had a lot of trauma, and I've go in flash in and out of these PTSD moments. When it happens to you, do you get tunnel vision? That's all you can Like I
everything.
have sideboards on and that's all I can see and hear at that
and
moment.
and that's exactly it. It is,
Okay.
when I say it's shocking in, it is
Okay.
because everything else is blurred and
Yeah.
and vibrating to where you're there. You're no longer 40 years later. You are now standing right there
Right
looking
there.
exactly what's happening, and everything
Yeah.
else besides you is, it's almost like getting into a different dimension where you're going through time back where you were.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh my gosh.
You can get
Yeah.
all the smells. You still remember all the sounds, the birds chirping, the neighbors screaming, the ambulance sirens in the background.
Right.
It's yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah.
And we think about that as a fight and flight kind of thing too. You know, it's
Yeah.
like you guys are fighting for somebody's life basically,
Yeah.
and it'll. Oh, it's just amazing how human brain and even spiritual, how things can throw you back into time.
Oh
You
yeah.
know?
Yeah. I know that when I first got with my wife, that was one of the things that I was almost shameful, and I was almost ashamed to tell her. And when we got together, it's, you maybe have to wear a helmet to bed sometimes because
Yeah.
I am very active in in bed, and I guess she took it the wrong way until the next morning.
There's the
Yeah.
humor.
Yeah, so it was interesting. I remember one time we had woken up, and I I used to have well, you might still see it. I had a tattoo of one of my exes here, and I remember waking up and my wife telling me and saying the girl's name was here, and she was hitting me all night, and I got up scared. I'm like, where is she? Oh no, she's gonna hit me too. And she goes, right there, that's where she's at. And I'm like, oh okay, yeah.
Oh
So
my.
there are always, yeah, I am a very, very active sleeper. So
Yeah.
So and that, well, and people don't think about things like a lot of our trauma comes out in our sleep because our brain's trying to process it, right? And
oh
so
yeah,
I used to sleepwalk horribly. Thank
so did
goodness I
I.
don't.
Oh yeah,
Oh, it was terrible. I would
oh
act
yeah.
things out. Um, but for me, it's I wake up from nightmares, from trauma, from
Mhm.
PTSD. I wake up from it in a cold sweat sometimes, or like I just wake up with the start and I'm right there again and I have to talk myself down. Like it's
Mhm.
not, I'm here, I'm safe, everything's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
crazy what the human body does to try to process all the trauma that we've been through. And in your line of work, holy crap.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The trauma.
you brought back a memory with the sleepwalking. Um, Luckily, I don't sleep completely in the nude. Okay, I have my whitey tighties on, or my Superman underwear, and I remember there was various times where I don't know where I was, but I remember knocking on the door to come back into the house in my sleep, and the knock would wake me up. Um,
Oh.
so there was a time in my life where I had to contact my neighbors and let them know, hey, I'm not a pervert and I'm not a weirdo. If you see me out in the middle of the night walking in my underwear, please call my family to come get me because of PTSD and whatnot. And back then, living in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood was it was interesting, some of the responses. Very
Oh,
interesting with some of the responses. You get the machismo response where your butt better not come over to my house like that. And I'm,
yeah, yeah. You're like, I'm
dude,
asleep. What can I say?
dude, come on.
Wow. Wow.
Oh my gosh.
What
Oh.
so what is okay, so if you were to give like one piece of advice to young EMTs out there, like people who want to get into this field, what's the one piece of advice that you think above all else you could give to them to help process trauma that they're going to see.
Have a spiritual base, and therapy and counseling and psychiatry should go hand in hand.
I like that. Yeah.
If you are deciding to get into that job, the very first day you start, you should already have seen your therapist, and you should already have a psychiatrist in line. Not that you may suffer so much trauma that you have to go see him, but you're going into a field where that is expected. And to have something in a safety net for when that does happen, or you do need help processing violence and trauma and whatnot, it is already there. You're not suffering symptoms of massive PTSD where it is not only affecting you, but everybody you love before you go to get therapy and counseling.
Mm-hmm.
I think you just said something very important that we wanted to touch on in this whole series of The Thin Line was somebody you love, because our family deals with our trauma.
Yeah.
And it's hugely important to have, to let them know, maybe not what you rolled on, because that's maybe not that, but just say, man, it was bad. And I need you to know it was bad tonight, and I am going to go talk to the counselor.
It is extremely important to have a social support system, even a natural support system that you're born into, that you have at home, whether it be a wife, brother, sister, siblings, whatever, to the point where there is a code word when you walk through the door. Or if you don't come home straight after work, and you let them know, I am processing, because there were several times where I couldn't go home. I needed 8-12 hours to be able to process and become the David that my wife and family knew, not this person who just survived and gone through all this trauma, and somebody they won't recognize. And I hate to say it like it's two people, but going through severe trauma like that is a changing experience. It takes a lot of processing to get out of that frame of mind to become the person that you were before you started that shift.
Yeah. And it's true what they say too, it's like you guys put on a uniform, if you really think about it. It's like,
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Like it's like a uniform. That's it. All work, right?
Yeah.
There should be no emotion. I'm a different person, but yet in order for me to become the family person, you have to.
Depending on what position you're working, I know literally there was a mask with the uniform that came on when I worked for the Department of Corrections. Putting on that uniform, putting on that badge, and walking into a prison, whether you had up to 500, 600 inmates inside a housing unit, and it is you and your partner walking around with no weapons. Sure, you have a gunner, but the gunner can't see everything all the time.
Right.
So you put on a mask, you put on a shield, a force field, that the negative environment, that the words that you get called, everything has no effect on you, because you have to put that mask on.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up with the law enforcement family, and then one of my boyfriends for many, many years was a California Department of Corrections transport officer, and then he went into Old Folsom, and then he went into San Quentin, and then he went to Pelican Bay.
Man.
What years were those?
Oh my gosh. through the 80s. I can't remember 80s and 90s.
The gladiator years. That's back when the Mexican mafia was coming up hard, and there was a lot of gang violence
Yeah.
during that time.
Yeah.
I started in the Department of Corrections in early 90s, and yeah, it was rocking and rolling back then.
Yeah.
There was a lot of staff assaults. There was a lot of riots that went down. It was, yeah.
I
So-
remember family night at Folsom Prison.
That
Where
was so crazy. I hear Johnny
Yeah.
Cash's name.
Yeah,
It's so okay in my head right now.
we were all invited in to eat in the cafeteria served by the prisoners so that we could see where our significant others worked, right?
Wow.
And so we were in there with our sporks eating our food. And then we got to tour whatever unit our significant other worked in. My significant other worked in the max holding area, max unit. So it was the worst of the worst in Folsom. And these guys didn't get out of their cells. They got out 1 hour a day into a holding area to do their laps.
Their shoe, yeah.
Yes. And see, we got to walk through it. So all the prisoners are standing there on their best behavior in their cells, staring at us through their little windows. And I came back from that going, no wonder he's crazy. My significant other. No, he really, I mean, there was emotional issues there that I couldn't figure out what was going on. I'm like, oh, I get it now.
There's the answer.
Did you feel it when you walked in?
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. And then years later, I had to go back to Folsom as a state inspector. I had to go in as a state inspector for environmental stuff, right? And I just eked out of there as the doors were closing for a lockdown for 72 hours. I would have been stuck in there for 72 hours. And I came back to my office and said, you find someone else. I'm never going back. I mean, it was spooky to be in there. Yeah. I mean, that's just not, it's not in my realm of this is where I want to work. So I don't, why am I here? This job is not that important to me. So find someone else or I quit kind of job.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling. I endured 13 years and the negativity was just, it was, in all honesty, the negativity was changing me into a person that I did not want to become. I was brought into this world to help people, and I was brought in to, and I feel that I was always supposed to help others, and getting in there with that negativity. And I think it was the last 6 years, I was a gunner in the yards. Once they realize that you are not afraid to do your job, and if you've let one fly and done your job, you don't get out of the towers no more. That is your spot.
Oh boy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Because you're not afraid to take the shot.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. So do you have any, like, I guess prison's not funny, but do you have any kind of awkward stories that?
I do have one, and it's more on myself. It's a little more self-incriminating than anything. Back in the 90s, there was
Allegedly.
a lot. Allegedly, back in the 90s, prison work was a lot more hands-on.
Yeah.
And that's where I'll leave that. And I've learned, as a young man, I was a pretty big guy, and I carried a pretty big chip on my shoulder. I could hold my own, and I knew it. And there was this one young Hispanic kid who maybe weighed, $105, if that, and very disrespectful. And back then, it was alleged that sometimes officers would take their badges off and take people into the restroom and go one-on-one.
Mhm.
And allegedly,
Assert the dominance.
and again, it was if you get the best of me, fine, we'll leave it inside the restroom, and if I get the best of you, fine, we'll leave it inside the restroom, but you will respect me from this point forward.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the gist of what it used to be. I never did background checks on anybody because I felt that I always could judge a man by what he presented in front of me, not by what I read. And I should have read on this kid. He was a featherweight. He was a featherweight, and he ended up, rocking my world a little bit, which was okay. After it was all said and done, I wore sunglasses for about a week, but I earned my respect inside that unit. We came out and dusted myself off, and we kept going. But from that point forward, earned that respect in that prison. It was no longer getting disrespected by these youngsters anymore because I held my own. Not only that, but I took my lickings and didn't tell, didn't,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we held allegedly. And, yeah.
So what do you feel would be let me rephrase this. So how do you feel about rehabilitation with prisoners? Do you feel like it's actually successful, or do you feel like it's just a revolving door? Because that's what I see sometimes.
We see that a lot. We see that a lot only because addiction is such a powerful disease, period.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that this rehabilitation part, where they are spending money on treatment centers, and not saying it because I have a treatment center, please don't take it that way, but I do believe that it is definitely a step in the right direction. Because if we could get half of our addicts that get sent to prison clean and come out and rehabilitate and make them the family men that they were supposed to be before addiction got a hold of them, it would all be worth it. Yes. Not only saving money from them going back to prison, staying on probation or parole, but the families and the children of these men and women need them.
Yes.
We need to be able to bring back our family units and eradicate addiction from it. There are so many innocent people getting affected by it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
Wow. David, I know that you have a million stories to share with us. And but as our first guest, thank you very much. And I think this was an incredible kickoff to our series, to this podcast, because we want to talk about all aspects of what it's like in all aspects of being a first responder. And thank you for your service.
Yes,
and
thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. And I wish you nothing but success in your new venture here with the counseling service. And where can you please, I please maybe text me or something, all of the information on your counseling service, and I'm going to put it into the show description so people can get a hold of you.
I sure will.
Yeah, we'd love to send people your direction. And so you, for people who don't know David, he's when you asked me if I was okay a few minutes ago, you saw something.
Oh yeah.
I flashed
I
back.
felt it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So David is incredibly gifted as not only a counselor, but as a spiritual person. He's very gifted, and he knew that I was going right back to something I had experienced. And he's like, "You okay?" I'm like, "What? Was that for me?" I looked at Jesse going, "Is he talking to her?" Oh shit, he saw something in my face. So that comes from years of dealing with trauma You
Yeah.
saw it, you recognized it. I flashed back into something and you had to bring me out of it. And it's really amazing that you hold that for years. You hold that. And do you have just one maybe last word of wisdom to somebody who holds on to stuff like that? What do you do?
Therapy.
Therapy.
Learn
Yeah.
to process. Learn to process. I know that some of this, well, these experiences are part of us now, but learning how to survive and learning how to manage through them is imperative. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if ever thoughts of self-harm come in, please reach out. This world is a better place with everybody in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm just so honored to have you on as our guest.
I am
Thank you
too.
so much.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
we would love to have you back on because I know that you have some absolutely bonker stories to talk about. So I want to hear them. It doesn't always have to be super deep. We will cover it all. And please tell your other half. Thank you, because I
I
know
sure
that
will.
she gave us more than a few minutes of your life. So thank you so much. And we will catch up with everybody watching this episode soon. Jesse,
All right.
any parting remarks?
I am just in awe of Mr. David and all the work that he does for everybody spiritually, mentally, even physically. You know, it takes a special person to deal with issues, not only their issues personally, but issues with other people. And so I thank you for all the hard work you're doing. And I definitely would love to have you back on again.
Thank you. That would be an honor.
Thank you, David. And we will talk with you soon.
All righty.
And for now, we're all signing off.
We're all signing off.